Enamorus is coming to Pokemon Go. With Valentine's Day comes its debut in Elite Raids. But how worthwhile is the fourth force of nature? Is it worth skipping out on a Valentine's date? Well, let's get right into it and find out. Welcome back, everyone. The love-hate Pokemon Enamorus debuts real soon in Elite Raids, extra difficult raids that occur at certain gyms, EX gyms specifically. They are really tricky though, and you can only fight them in person, similar to Shadow Raids. Enamorus Incarnate will be really strong, but it's pretty frail too. While it is possible to duo it as best friends with party power and top counters, you'd be much safer going for a group of 3 or more. But is this boss worth the hassle? Well, let's take a look at its stats and moves. Enamorus Incarnate is a very attack-weighted Pokemon. It's actually comparable to Rayquaza, with a really high 281 attack stat compared to Rayquaza's 284. Though Enamorus does have a lower defense and stamina, making it even glassier than the already frail Rayquaza. But as we'll talk about, Enamorus's typing will actually be a pretty big help in that department. But let's start off with its raid performance. That 284 attack stat has promise, but do its moves stack up? Thankfully, yes. Enamorus has Fairy Wind for a Fairy Fast move, and Dazzling Gleam in particular is one of the best Fairy charged moves for raids. As such, Enamorus immediately comes out the gate swinging with a real impressive performance as a Fairy attacker. It's actually the top Fairy attacker outside of Mega Gardevoir. And while the Fairy type isn't used too often in raids, with Guzzlord being the main instance of you wanting to use them over dragons, Enamorus performs at a level that actually allows it to rival dragon types. And, if you're in cloudy weather, its performance skyrockets above most dragons. And also, unlike Pokemon like Salamence or Rayquaza, Enamorus's Fairy type allows it to resist dragon attacks from raid bosses, rather than being weak to them. So its lack of bulk is actually flipped on its head. And while less frequently used, I thought I'd also mention its flying performance. Seeing that Enamorus holds Fly, one of the best flying charged attacks. Now Enamorus doesn't have a flying fast move, not even any in the main series. However, even with Fairy Wind and Fly, Enamorus still comes out as a top counter against bosses like Virizion and Buzzwole, so it's got a lot of utility as well. So for raiding, I don't know if I'd call Enamorus a must-have, but it's very strong. It would definitely make a great addition to your team, especially with raid bosses like Giratina and Palkia coming later this month. On the PvP side of things though, Enamorus will obviously want the high energy generation of Fairy Wind, but from there, you've got the choice between Fly, Grass Knot, and Dazzling Gleam. I'd say Fly and Dazzling Gleam would make for the best moveset, with Fly being cheaper and Dazzling Gleam offering valuable super effective damage against the various dragons of the Master League. Grass Knot is a viable option here, specifically to help you against Groudon and Kyogre, but I still think it's the weakest choice of the 3. But with these moves, how well does Enamorus perform? Well, its Master League win rate isn't bad, but overall, I wouldn't call it too impressive. As a Fairy Flying type, Enamorus does about what you'd expect it to do, beating most dragons and Pokemon with dragon or ground moves like Lugia and Groudon, but it doesn't stretch too much outside of that. It still struggles against Pokemon like Ho-Oh, Xerneas, Landorus, and Mewtwo, among several others. I think Enamorus will have utility in the Master League, but I don't think I'd call it much better than the other big Fairy legendaries, Xerneas and Zacian. And that's also without thinking about how, until Enamorus appears in standard 5-star raids, it'll be difficult to get the XL required to bring it to 50. So all in all, Enamorus is more of a raid Pokemon than a PvP Pokemon. It's the Therian form who I think could break out more in PvP. That form loses a chunk of its attack for a higher defense, which I think would still benefit it in the Master League, assuming it gets the right moves. But we'll be here to analyze that form whenever it comes, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video, and our other analyses. If you like this one though, we'd appreciate a thumbs up. It lets us know that you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more. But now we come back to the question of how worthwhile Enamorus is. Is it worth the Elite Raid hassle? Well, it is an excellent raid attacker, but if it isn't convenient for you to find a group of people to take down one of these raids on Valentine's Day, I'd say probably not. Make no mistake, this is an impressive Pokemon, but if you've got a sound Dragon and Fairy team already, you'll likely be fine to wait for it to come back at some point. Down in the comments though, let me know if you'll be attempting to take down Enamorus. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.